The warm California sun hung lazily in the sky as Patricia Taylor, Keanu Reeves' mother, guided her silver Mercedes through the busy streets of Los Angeles. It was a typical Sunday afternoon in 1995, but there was nothing typical about Patricia's life anymore. Her son had become one of Hollywood's biggest stars after the huge success of the movie Speed, yet she continued her normal routine like any other working mother. Patricia had just spent 2 hours at the local farmer's market, carefully picking fresh vegetables and fruits for the week ahead. She always believed in cooking healthy meals, a habit she had passed on to Keanu during their simpler days when money was tight. Now, even though her son could afford to buy her anything she wanted, Patricia insisted on doing her own shopping and living life on her own terms. The trunk of her car was filled with brown paper bags containing organic produce, whole grain bread, and a special type of green tea she loved. In the passenger seat lay her worn leather bag, stuffed with costume design sketches for her latest project. As a costume designer for rock stars and Hollywood productions, Patricia's talent kept her busy with work she truly enjoyed. As she drove, her mind wandered to the upcoming costume fitting session with a famous rock band scheduled for tomorrow. Her sketches included elaborate leather jackets with hand-stitched details and custom-made boots that would make the band stand out on stage. Patricia smiled, thinking about how her career had grown alongside her son's. While Keanu was becoming famous for his acting, she was making a name for herself in the costume design world. The car's gas gauge caught her attention, the needle hovering dangerously close to empty. Patricia spotted a gas station on the outskirts of the city, a smaller one she hadn't visited before. The prices looked reasonable, and the station appeared clean enough, so she decided to stop there. As she pulled in, the radio played California Dreamin' by the Mamas and the Papas, one of Keanu's favorite songs from his childhood. Patricia parked near pump number 3, between a dusty pickup truck and an empty spot. She checked her reflection in the rearview mirror, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. At 51, she still carried herself with the grace and style that had first caught the attention of Keanu's father years ago in Beirut. Her face showed laugh lines earned from years of joy, and her eyes held the same gentle warmth that her famous son was known for. Getting out of the car, Patricia breathed in the warm afternoon air mixed with the smell of gasoline and nearby food trucks. She wore simple but elegant clothes, a white linen blouse, comfortable jeans, and well-worn brown leather boots. Around her neck hung the silver pendant Keanu had given her for Christmas, a simple design that matched her tasteful style. The gas station was relatively quiet for a Sunday afternoon. An old radio played country music from somewhere inside the small convenience store. A teenage employee lazily swept the concrete near the store entrance, while a middle-aged man in a business suit rushed to pay for his gas at the outdoor payment machine. As Patricia inserted her credit card into the pump, she noticed a group of motorcycles rumbling in the distance. The sound reminded her of Keanu and his love for bikes. He had recently bought a new Norton Commando, and she remembered how excited he had been showing it to her, explaining every detail of the machine with boyish enthusiasm. Despite his fame and success, Keanu had remained the same kind, passionate soul she had raised. She began filling her tank, planning the week ahead in her mind. There were costume fittings to arrange, sketches to finish, and she hoped to have dinner with Keanu if his busy filming schedule allowed it. The sun cast long shadows across the gas station's concrete surface, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of nearby jasmine flowers. It seemed like just another peaceful Sunday afternoon in Los Angeles, but Patricia Taylor had no idea that her ordinary day was about to become extraordinary. The peaceful afternoon atmosphere shattered as 3 loud motorcycles thundered into the gas station. The machines were massive Harley-Davidsons, their chrome pipes gleaming in the sunlight. The bikers who rode them looked just as intimidating as their motorcycles sounded. All 3 men wore heavy leather jackets despite the warm weather, each covered in patches and symbols that made Patricia feel uneasy. The leader of the group, a tall man with a thick gray beard and arms covered in tattoos, was the first to notice Patricia's Mercedes. He nudged his friends and pointed at the car, speaking in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Well, look what we have here, boys. Somebody's doing pretty well for themselves." His rough laugh echoed across the gas station, making the teenage employee quickly retreat inside the store. The other 2 bikers were younger but equally intimidating. One wore a red bandana and had a long scar across his left cheek, while the other was heavily built with a shaved head that reflected the afternoon sun. They parked their bikes in a way that almost blocked Patricia's car, creating a half circle around her. The formation wasn't exactly threatening, but it definitely wasn't friendly either. Patricia tried to focus on the gas pump's numbers as they clicked upward, but she could feel their eyes on her. She had dealt with all types of people in her costume design career, from difficult rock stars to demanding actors, but something about these men made her nervous. Still, she held her head high and maintained her composure, a trait she had always tried to teach Keanu. "That's a mighty fine car for a gas station like this," the biker with the bandana called out, walking closer to inspect the Mercedes. His boots made heavy sounds against the concrete. "Must be nice having that kind of money." He ran a gloved hand along the car's polished surface, leaving smudges on the clean silver paint. The third biker, the one with the shaved head, revved his motorcycle's engine repeatedly, creating an intimidating wall of noise. The sound echoed off the gas station's metal roof and made it impossible for Patricia to pretend she couldn't hear their comments. A few other customers who had been at the station quickly finished their business and drove away, leaving Patricia increasingly isolated. "Maybe she's one of them movie people," the leader suggested, moving his bike a little closer. The motorcycle's exhaust pipes were still hot, and Patricia could feel the heat from where she stood. "They're all over this part of town, thinking they're better than everyone else." Patricia finished filling her tank and carefully replaced the gas cap, her hand steady despite her racing heart. She had lived in tough neighborhoods before, raised Keanu as a single mother, and faced many challenges in her life. She knew the best response was usually no response at all, but when the biker with the bandana deliberately backed his motorcycle too close to her car, leaving a visible scratch on the fresh paint, she couldn't stay quiet anymore. "Excuse me," Patricia said, her voice firm but polite. "I believe you've damaged my car." She spoke with the same calm authority she used when directing costume fittings for difficult clients. However, this situation was very different from dealing with temperamental artists in her studio. The three bikers exchanged looks and then slowly began to move closer, forming a tighter circle around Patricia and her car. The leader's face showed a mix of amusement and menace as he killed his engine. The sudden silence felt more threatening than the noise had been. "Oh, did we damage your fancy car?" he asked, mock concern in his voice. "That's too bad. Maybe you shouldn't bring such a nice vehicle to this part of town." The other two bikers laughed, a harsh sound that made Patricia's skin crawl. She stood her ground, but her heart pounded as she realized the situation was quickly getting out of control. Patricia Taylor stood straight and tall beside her scratched Mercedes, channeling the strength she had developed as a single mother raising Keanu and his sister Kim in tough neighborhoods across the world. Her hands were steady as she reached for her purse, though her heart raced beneath her calm exterior. Years of working in the high-pressure world of costume design had taught her that showing fear often made bad situations worse. "I'd like to take pictures of the damage," she said firmly, pulling out her small camera. It was the same one she used to photograph her costume designs, a gift from Keanu after his first big movie role. The leader of the bikers stepped forward, his massive frame blocking the afternoon sun and casting a shadow over Patricia's face. "Put that camera away, lady," he growled, his voice low and threatening. "Unless you want it to end up like your car." The other two bikers moved closer, their boots scraping against the concrete. The sound reminded Patricia of stage crews moving heavy equipment, but this wasn't a theater, and these men weren't part of her usual world of show business. The teenage store clerk watched nervously through the window, but made no move to help. Patricia couldn't blame him. These men were intimidating, and she wouldn't want a young boy getting hurt trying to protect her. Instead, she took a deep breath and remembered what she always told Keanu. Staying calm in tough situations was a superpower all its own. "I understand you might be having a difficult day," Patricia said, her voice steady and clear. She'd used the same tone when dealing with angry directors or frustrated actors. But damaging someone's property and trying to frighten them isn't going to make things better for anyone. She kept her camera in her hand, refusing to be intimidated into putting it away. The biker with the red bandana laughed, but it wasn't a friendly sound. He kicked his motorcycle's stand down and walked a slow circle around Patricia's car. "Listen to her, boys," he mocked. "Trying to give us life lessons at a gas station. Must be nice looking down at everyone from that fancy car of yours." Patricia thought about Keanu, about how despite his fame and success, he still treated everyone with respect. He would chat with janitors and crew members on his movie sets just as easily as he talked with famous directors. She had raised him to see the worth in every person, and she wasn't about to abandon those principles now, even when faced with these threatening men. "I don't look down on anyone," she replied calmly. "I'm just asking for basic respect, the same as you would want for yourselves or your families." The words seemed to hang in the hot afternoon air. The bald biker's face twitched slightly at the mention of family, and for a moment, Patricia saw uncertainty cross his features. But the leader wasn't moved. He stepped even closer, so close that Patricia could smell the leather of his jacket and the cigarette smoke clinging to his beard. "You don't know anything about us or our families," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "And you don't want to find out, so why don't you just get in your fancy car and drive away, before things get really unpleasant?" The threat was clear in his words, but Patricia didn't move. She had worked too hard in her life to let anyone bully her. She had designed costumes under impossible deadlines, raised 2 children while moving between countries, and built a respected career from nothing. These men might be trying to frighten her, but she wasn't about to run away. Just then, the distant sound of another motorcycle engine cut through the tense atmosphere. All 3 bikers turned their heads toward the noise, momentarily distracted. Patricia felt her heart leap. Something about the engine's sound was familiar, a rhythm she had heard many times before. But surely it couldn't be who she thought it was, not here, not now. The sound of the approaching motorcycle grew louder, its distinctive rumble echoing off the surrounding buildings. Keanu Reeves was riding his beloved Norton Commando, a classic British motorcycle he had bought after filming Speed. He was taking the back roads home from a meeting with his agent about an exciting new movie project called The Matrix, enjoying the freedom of the open road when something caught his eye. From a distance, Keanu spotted a familiar silver Mercedes at a small gas station. He knew that car well. He had personally picked it out for his mother, choosing a model that matched her elegant but practical nature. But something about the scene ahead didn't look right. 3 large motorcycles were clustered around the car, and even from a distance, Keanu could tell their riders weren't there for a friendly chat. Without hesitation, Keanu twisted the throttle, and his Norton responded with a deep roar. He had learned to ride motorcycles for movie roles, but his love for bikes went far beyond acting. He understood the culture, the mechanics, and most importantly, the respect that should exist between riders. As he got closer, his heart began to race. He could now clearly see his mother standing surrounded by the 3 bikers. The afternoon sun glinted off his black helmet as he turned sharply into the gas station. Keanu's entrance was dramatic but controlled, his years of motorcycle experience evident in the smooth way he handled the powerful machine. The Norton's engine echoed off the station's metal roof, its distinctive British twin-cylinder sound cutting through the tense atmosphere like a knife. The 3 Harley riders turned to look at the newcomer, momentarily distracted from their intimidation of Patricia. They watched as Keanu skillfully maneuvered his motorcycle into the space between them and his mother's car. The move was deliberate but non-threatening. He was protecting his mother while avoiding any aggressive gestures that might escalate the situation. Patricia felt a wave of relief wash over her as she recognized the familiar shape of her son on his motorcycle. Even through his helmet and riding gear, she would know him anywhere. She had watched him practice riding that Norton for hours, perfecting his technique with the same dedication he brought to his acting. Now, seeing him arrive just when she needed him most, she felt proud not just of his timing, but of the man he had become. Keanu killed the engine, and the sudden silence felt heavy with anticipation. The leader of the Harley riders squared his shoulders, clearly preparing for a confrontation. The other 2 bikers moved slightly, adjusting their positions to face this new arrival. The teenage store clerk had now pressed his face against the window, phone in hand, probably recognizing the famous actor who had just pulled in. With practiced ease, Keanu swung his leg over his motorcycle and planted both feet firmly on the ground. He was still wearing the casual clothes from his meeting, jeans, boots, and a well-worn leather jacket that had seen many miles on the road. His movements were calm and unhurried as he reached up to remove his helmet. The 3 Harley riders watched intently, their earlier bravado slightly shaken by this unexpected development. They had been expecting an easy afternoon of intimidation, not an encounter with one of Hollywood's biggest stars. But more than that, they were faced with a man who clearly knew his way around motorcycles, someone who spoke their language. As Keanu lifted off his helmet, his long dark hair slightly messy from the ride. His eyes immediately found his mother's. In that brief glance, he checked that she was okay, and she gave him a small nod. Then, with the same genuine calm he brought to every situation, Keanu turned to face the three bikers. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the gas station as he prepared to speak, everyone present knowing that the next few moments would determine how this tense situation would play out. Everyone at the gas station expected some kind of confrontation. The teenage clerk had his phone ready to record, and even Patricia held her breath, unsure what her son would do. But Keanu Reeves had never been one to follow expected scripts, whether in movies or real life. Instead of showing anger or making threats, Keanu's face lit up with genuine interest as his eyes fell on the leader's Harley Davidson. "That's a beautiful Softail custom you've got there," he said, his voice friendly and enthusiastic. "The 95 model, right? I love what you've done with the chrome work." The unexpected comment caught the biker completely off guard, his tough guy stance faltering for a moment. The leader looked at Keanu suspiciously, trying to figure out if he was being mocked. But there was no trace of sarcasm in Keanu's face, only real appreciation for the motorcycle. "Yeah, it's a 95, the biker replied slowly, his aggressive tone softening slightly. "You know your bikes?" Keanu walked closer to the Harley, keeping his movements casual and open. "I've been riding for years," he said, pointing to his Norton. "But I've always admired the sound of a well-tuned Harley engine. Those custom pipes you got, they give it that perfect rumble." The biker with the red bandana couldn't help but look impressed that a Hollywood star knew so much about motorcycles. Patricia watched in amazement as her son did what he did best, connecting with people through genuine kindness and shared interests. She had seen him use this same approach on movie sets, treating every crew member, from directors to coffee runners, with equal respect and interest. "The Norton's a classic choice," the bald biker commented, his eyes moving to Keanu's motorcycle. His voice had lost its threatening edge, replaced by curiosity. "What year is that one?" The tension in the air was starting to dissolve, replaced by something that felt more like a gathering of motorcycle enthusiasts. "It's a 73 Commando 850, Keanu replied enthusiastically. "Want to take a look?" The previous owner kept it in amazing condition. He gestured for the bikers to come closer, and soon all three men were gathered around his Norton, their earlier hostility forgotten in their shared appreciation for the vintage machine. The leader ran his hand along the Norton's fuel tank, nodding appreciatively. "They don't make them like this anymore," he said, his earlier gruffness replaced by respect. "My old man used to work on British bikes. He always said they had a soul you couldn't find in modern machines." Keanu's eyes lit up at this comment. "Your father was absolutely right," he agreed. "There's something special about these older bikes. Every ride feels like a conversation between you and the machine." The other bikers nodded in understanding, and Patricia noticed how their body language had completely changed. Shoulders relaxed, faces open, hands no longer clenched. The biker with the red bandana pointed to some custom work on his own Harley. "I did all the modifications myself," he said proudly. "Took me 6 months to get it just right." Keanu listened intently as the man explained the technical details of his customization work, asking thoughtful questions that showed his genuine interest. Even the teenage clerk had come outside now, realizing that instead of a fight, he was witnessing something much more remarkable. A moment where barriers of fame, prejudice, and first impressions were melting away through a shared passion for motorcycles. Patricia smiled to herself, remembering all the hours Keanu had spent learning about motorcycles, not just for his movie roles but because he truly loved them. What might have been a dangerous confrontation had been transformed into a peaceful exchange between fellow riders, all because her son chose to see the humanity in these men rather than their threatening exterior. The afternoon sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the gas station as the unlikely group continued their conversation. What had started as a tense confrontation had transformed into something nobody expected, a genuine exchange between people who had misjudged each other at first glance. As they talked about motorcycles, the leader of the bikers, who introduced himself as Mike, shared stories about growing up in his father's repair shop. "Dad could fix any bike that came through those doors," he said, his voice softening with memory. "He taught me everything I know about engines." The tough exterior he had shown earlier was melting away, replaced by the passionate voice of someone talking about what they loved. Keanu listened intently, sitting on his Norton while the others gathered around. The teenage clerk had brought out cold sodas for everyone, no longer afraid but fascinated by the scene unfolding at his usually quiet gas station. Patricia watched as her son asked thoughtful questions about Mike's father's shop, showing the same genuine interest he brought to learning about every person he met. You know, the biker with the red bandana, who called himself Tony, said while looking at the scratch they had made on Patricia's car, "We were real jerks earlier. That's not who we tried to be." He shuffled his feet, clearly uncomfortable with his previous behavior. The bald biker, Dave, nodded in agreement, his earlier threatening demeanor replaced by genuine remorse. Patricia stepped forward, her natural grace and kindness matching her son's. "Sometimes we all make quick judgments," she said gently. "What matters is being willing to see beyond them." She told them about her work as a costume designer, how she learned to look past people's exteriors to find the story they wanted to tell through their clothes. The bikers were surprised to learn about Patricia's career. "You design for rock bands?" Dave asked, his eyes widening. "Man, my daughter would love that. She's studying fashion design in college, but I never." He stopped, seeming embarrassed about sharing such personal information. But Keanu and Patricia's genuine interest encouraged him to continue. As Dave talked about his daughter's dreams, Mike shared how his father's shop had closed down due to bigger businesses moving into the area. Tony spoke about his own struggles trying to keep his custom motorcycle repair business alive in a changing economy. With each story, the barriers between them crumbled further. "You know what's funny?" Mike said, looking at his reflection in Patricia's car window. "We saw this fancy car and immediately thought we knew everything about who owned it. Made us act like the very kind of people we hate dealing with ourselves." The other bikers nodded, understanding the irony of their earlier behavior. Keanu smiled, running his hand along his Norton's handlebars. "Motorcycles taught me something important," he shared. "When you're riding, it doesn't matter what you do for a living or where you come from. We're all just people who love the freedom of two wheels." His words resonated with everyone present, capturing the simple truth that had brought them together. The afternoon light had turned golden, and the gas station had become a place of unexpected connection. Other customers who pulled in watched in amazement as the famous actor, his elegant mother, and three tough-looking bikers chatted like old friends. The teenage clerk, who had been recording snippets on his phone, realized he was witnessing something more meaningful than just a celebrity encounter. Patricia looked at her son with pride, not because of his fame or success, but because of how he had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a moment of genuine human connection. The scratch on her car, which had seemed so important earlier, now felt like a small price to pay for the lesson in humanity they had all received. Mike, the leader of the bikers, kept looking at the scratch their motorcycles had left on Patricia's car. The mark that had started all this trouble now seemed to bother him more than anyone else. During a pause in their conversation about motorcycles, he cleared his throat and addressed Patricia directly. "Ma'am," he said, pulling out his worn leather wallet, "I know it doesn't excuse how we acted, but I'd like to pay for fixing that scratch." His weathered hands held out several crumpled bills, but Patricia gently shook her head. The gesture itself meant more to her than any monetary compensation. "I have a better idea," Keanu suggested, his eyes lighting up. "The station's convenience store has fresh coffee, and I'd love to hear more about your father's repair shop, Mike." The unexpected invitation made the tough biker smile, revealing a warmth that had been hidden behind his intimidating exterior. The small group moved inside the store, where the teenage clerk, whose name tag read Jimmy, scrambled to get fresh cups ready. The fluorescent lights of the store were a stark contrast to the golden afternoon sun outside, but somehow it made the conversation feel more intimate, more real. As they settled around the store's small counter with their steaming cups, Patricia shared stories about her early days as a costume designer. She told them about creating outfits for punk rock bands in the 1970s, working with limited budgets but unlimited creativity. Tony, the biker with the red bandana, was especially interested in her stories about designing leather jackets for musicians. "That's not so different from customizing bikes," he said thoughtfully, stirring his coffee. "It's all about taking something basic and making it unique, making it tell a story." Patricia nodded, pleased that he understood the connection between their different forms of creative expression. Dave, the bald biker, pulled out his phone and proudly showed everyone pictures of his daughter's fashion designs. She's got real talent, Patricia said sincerely, examining the photos. If she'd like, I could show her around my workshop sometime. Dave's eyes grew wet at the offer, and he had to take a moment to compose himself. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on their lives, dreams, and the challenges they faced. Mike spoke about trying to keep his father's legacy alive in a world that increasingly favored new over old. These days, everyone wants the latest model, he said, shaking his head. They don't understand the soul of a machine that's been loved and maintained for decades. Keanu understood exactly what Mike meant. That's why I love my Norton, he agreed. Every scratch and dent tells a story. It's not just transportation, it's history you can ride. The other bikers nodded in appreciation, recognizing a kindred spirit despite his Hollywood success. Jimmy, the young clerk, listened to their conversation while pretending to stock shelves nearby. He had stopped recording on his phone, realizing that some moments are better experienced than shared on social media. The scene before him was teaching him more about judgment and understanding than any viral video could. Patricia watched as these men, who had scared her just an hour ago, shared their coffee and stories with her son. She saw how Keanu's genuine interest in their lives had broken down walls that threats or aggression never could. It reminded her of something she had always taught him: respect given freely often returns multiplied. As the afternoon wore on, the coffee cups emptied, but the conversation remained full of life. The scratch on the car, which had seemed so important earlier, had become just another story to tell, a reminder that first impressions don't always tell the whole truth. In this small gas station store, surrounded by snack displays and refrigerated drinks, a group of people who had started as strangers were discovering the simple power of looking past appearances to find the humanity within. The sun was setting when the group finally stepped out of the convenience store, the sky painted in beautiful shades of orange and purple. The gas station looked different now, no longer a place of confrontation, but a spot where something special had happened. The evening air was cool, and the street lights were just beginning to flicker on. Mike, the leader of the bikers, approached Patricia one last time. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying a gentleness that would have seemed impossible just hours ago, "I need to apologize properly. We judged you because of your car, your success. We did exactly what people do to us all the time, assume they know who we are just by looking at us." Tony and Dave nodded in agreement, their earlier hostility completely gone. Dave spoke up, his voice rough with emotion. "People see our leather and bikes, and they cross the street to avoid us. Maybe we got so used to being judged that we started judging others first." The honesty in his words touched everyone present. Patricia smiled warmly at the three men. "Life has taught me that everyone has a story worth hearing," she said. "Sometimes we just need to take the time to listen." She thought about all the different people she had worked with over the years. Famous actors, struggling musicians, quiet stagehands, and how each one had surprised her in some way. Jimmy, the teenage clerk, had come outside to clean the store windows, but he was really listening to every word. This ordinary day at his summer job had turned into an unexpected lesson about not judging books by their covers. He watched as Keanu chatted with the bikers about their motorcycles one last time, the group now looking like old friends sharing stories. "You know what's funny?" Tony said, adjusting his red bandana. "My kids aren't going to believe I met Keanu Reeves. But what I'm really going to tell them about is how we learned something important today." He looked at his reflection in the store window, seeming to see himself differently now. Keanu smiled that genuine smile that had made him famous. "The best stories are often the ones we don't expect," he said. "Like finding friendship in a gas station on an ordinary Sunday." The others laughed, appreciating how this famous actor could make such an unusual situation feel so natural. The bikers prepared to leave, checking their motorcycles and putting on their gloves. But before mounting their bikes, each one shook hands with Patricia and Keanu. These weren't the quick handshakes of strangers, but the warm grips of people who had shared something meaningful. "If you're ever in the area," Mike said to Patricia, "stop by my garage. I'd love to show you some of my dad's old repair manuals. The illustrations in them are like artwork. Might give you some ideas for your costume designs." Patricia promised she would, and everyone knew she meant it. As the three Harley-Davidsons roared to life, their sound no longer seemed threatening. Instead, it was like a farewell symphony echoing off the gas station's walls. The bikers gave one last wave before riding off into the sunset, their leather jackets catching the last rays of sunlight. Patricia turned to her son, her eyes shining with pride. "You never cease to amaze me," she said softly. "You turned what could have been an ugly situation into something beautiful." Keanu just shrugged, modest as always, but his mother knew that this was who he truly was, someone who could see past surfaces to find the good in people. Jimmy, still watching from near the store, finally put away his phone for good. He had started the day thinking he might capture viral content of a celebrity confrontation. Instead, he had witnessed something far more valuable, a real-life lesson about how kindness and understanding could bridge any divide. As Keanu and Patricia prepared to leave, they looked back at the gas station one last time. The scratch on the Mercedes no longer mattered. Instead, it would become a reminder of this extraordinary day, a story Patricia would tell for years to come, not about confrontation or fear, but about how her son's genuine interest in others had turned strangers into friends.